Hi, good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the second webinar sponsored by the Crash Modification Factors Clearinghouse team. This webinar is targeted to researchers, and then last week we held a similar webinar for practitioners. The purpose of these webinars is to update you on the change to the rating system that we use to assess the quality of CMFs that are in the clearinghouse. This change was implemented last week on Monday, February 15th, so some of you may have seen what this looks like in real life in the clearinghouse environment. But we wanted to take some time to review the changes to the new rating criteria, the changes to the website, as well as address any questions that you might have. But before we get started, I wanted to review just a couple of housekeeping items. First, if for some reason your computer or web browser freezes during the webinar, please reload this website and log back into the program. You should be able to join the session, rejoin the session, no problem. We are recording today's webinar and we'll post the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides and written responses to any questions that we're not able to get to back to the CMF Clearinghouse within the next couple of days. We also have muted everyone's audio for today's webinar. We're expecting a large number of attendees on this call, and so muting your audio helps us to cut down on any confusion and background noise. As an attendee, you have a control panel in the upper right corner of your screen that collapses and expands by clicking on the red arrow. Even though you're muted, you'll still have the ability to ask questions by entering them into the question box that is located within that control panel. Please feel free to ask questions related to the presentation as we go along by typing them into that box. We will be monitoring those questions and hosting a live Q&A session at the end of the presentation today. If you have any technical problems during the webinar, you can also enter them here. As I said, we will be monitoring this part of the webinar room. And so if you do have any technical issues, we should be able to help you resolve those. But hopefully there are no problems today. We also have questions that we'll be asking you throughout today's webinar using the polling software in this program. And then the first question we have here is just to help us get to know you a little bit better. So if you could, Kelly, bring up that poll. And if you could respond to this question just to let us know what your affiliation is. If you're a graduate student, academic research staff or professor, or if you work with state or federal government, if you're in the private sector, or if something else, you can select other. So we'll just give you a few more seconds to respond to this poll. And Kelly, if you can close that and summarize the results for us.
Sure, it looks like we have 27% government, 30% private, 25% academic research professors, and 18% grad students with 2% other.
Great, okay, thank you for that. Hopefully that gets you warmed up and focused on today's webinar. So now that we know a little bit about you, let me introduce today's presenters. Starting with myself, I'm Karen Scurry. I work with Federal Highways Headquarters Office of Safety, and I'm the Federal Highway Manager for the CMF Clearinghouse. We also have Taha Saleem, who is with the University of North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center. Taha is the program manager for the CMF Clearinghouse, so he manages the day-to-day operations of the clearinghouse and will be the primary presenter for today's webinar. We also have Dave Petrucci with Federal Highways Resource Center online today, and he'll review some questions and answers to what we've identified as frequently asked questions, and then he'll help facilitate a Q&A session so we can address any questions that you might have. We also have a couple of other folks online today to help us answer any of the tough questions. So we have Jerry Roche with Federal Highways Office of Safety, John McFadden with Federal Highways Resource Center, and Srini with UNC also online to help answer any questions that you guys might have. So Taha, I'm not seeing the slide.
Karen, that's what I'm trying to see. Kelly, maybe you can close the poll because I'm seeing the poll on the other screen. So.
Yeah, the poll, that looks like where you enter the poll. I think you're going to have to take it or X out. The poll itself is closed.
Okay, because on my screen, I'm sharing the screen right now, but it's but you know, on the attendee screen, it is still showing the poll, the quick poll that's showing up. If I'm correct, Karen, do you still see the quick poll there, or do you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yep, I see the poll, and if I try to X out, it says I'm going to leave the webinar.
Yeah.
I don't know if other attendees, maybe you can jot down in the chat pod or the question pod what you're seeing.
Yeah, it's still showing the quick poll. It might just be.
Apologies for the technical difficulties. Give us just a minute to see if we can get back on track here.
Sorry, guys.
Taha, do you want to try sharing your screen again, Xing out and then rejoining? Because it looks like the poll that's pulling up is one that needs to be taken.
Okay, so maybe I can stop sharing my screen and then share it again to see if it overwrites.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that'll do it.
Give me just 1 second here, you know, and I'll try to do it again. Okay, I think it solves it. Can you all do the...
I did it.
Perfect.
Yep.
So if it does happen again, you know, I know now what to do. So sorry guys for the difficulties here. So Karen, I have the next slide here for you then.
Yep, you can go to the next one. I covered that. So before I turn it over to Taha, I just want to just quickly remind you of some of the basic requirements for a study to be considered for inclusion in the CMF Clearinghouse. So to date, we have over 7,000 crash modification factors in the clearinghouse, and those CMFs come from, I believe, over 300 studies, many of which were likely produced from some of your research. And so for a study to be considered for review by the CMF Clearinghouse team for potential inclusion in the clearinghouse, it must meet these criteria. And so the first and foremost is that the study must be based on crash data. I know there's a lot of work and research in the area of surrogate measures, but for now, we are currently not capturing that information in the clearinghouse. So only crash-based studies are eligible for inclusion in the CMF clearinghouse. The study must also, the primary purpose of the study must also be to quantify the safety effect of a roadway feature or characteristic, not necessarily, I guess, developing or testing models, but the primary purpose should be to quantify the safety effectiveness of a countermeasure or treatment. The CMF Clearinghouse is also primarily focused on infrastructure countermeasures and treatments. And then the last requirement is that the study must explicitly present a CMF or a CMF function. In many cases, the study will get almost there, but not specifically report that CMF. And so if that's the case, we won't consider that for further review. So once we've identified studies that meet these criteria, then they go through what we call a critical review process, where researchers on the CMF Clearinghouse team review the CMS against our rating criteria. And so that's what the focus of today's webinar is going to be about, is the process and the rating criteria that we use to evaluate the CMF. So I will turn this over to Taha to walk you through those criteria now.
Thanks, Karen. So yeah, guys, so let us start, with a big question. Why is the CMF Clearinghouse transitioning to a new rating criteria? So to give you guys a bit of a background, the legacy or the old CMF star rating system has been in use since inception of the CMF Clearinghouse in 2009. So recently, the NCHRP 17-72 project developed a CMF rating system to update CMFs for the upcoming second edition of the Highway Safety Manual. And with this, the CMF Clearinghouse rating system also transitioned, as Karen mentioned earlier, on February the 15th, which was last week on Monday, to be consistent with the NCHRP 17-72 rating scheme. So this new system is very detailed and rigorous, and it provides scores for various different factors, which we will be discussing more on as we go further down the presentation. So before we move any further, we have a poll question that you should be seeing on your screen shortly. Maybe Kelly can pull that up. And the question is, how often do you use the CMF Clearinghouse? You have 5 options to choose from: daily, weekly, monthly, once or twice per year, and never. Maybe we'll give you a bit more time to record your responses. I think, Kelly, if you can close the poll and report back on the results.
Sure, we have 51% once or twice per year, 33 monthly, 10% said weekly, 6% said never, and nobody uses it daily.
Oh, okay. Those are some interesting stats. So let's move forward now. So before we talk about the rating system changes, let's talk briefly about the legacy CMF star rating system, or the old system that was in place before February the 15th. So in the legacy system, we used a single rating scheme to rate CMFs developed from either before-after, cross-sectional, meta-analysis, or meta-regression studies. And that scheme was based on 5 criteria that were study design, sample size, standard error, potential biases, and data sources. So in the legacy rating scheme, study design and sample sizes were given a weight of 2, whereas the other 3 criteria carry a weight of 1. And points were assigned to each criteria based on the level of rigor. So in that case, an excellent would equate to 2 points, a fair would equate to 1 point, or poor would equate to 0 points. So moving forward, the overall score of a CMF, in the legacy system was calculated using the formula that you can see on your screens right now. And this formula, as you can see, accounts for the weight of 2 that was given to the study design and the sample size. So the maximum number of possible points a CMF can get in this legacy system were 14. And the table that you can see on your screen, it shows the conversion from the 14-point scale to the star ratings. So as you can see, to get a 5-star rating in the legacy system, a study must check all boxes to receive the maximum possible 14 points. And that was the reason, why we had very few 5-star CMFs. And the only way, we can say a study or a CMF can get 5 stars was if the CMF was developed using data from multiple states. That was the only thing, that it would check off that data source score and get the maximum possible 14 points. So now that we have briefly talked about, the legacy star rating system, let's move towards discussing the rating system developed by NCHRP 17-72 and how it is different from the legacy CMF star rating system. So to begin with, NCHRP 17-72 provides a separate rating criteria for CMFs developed using before-after, cross-sectional, meta-analysis, and meta-regression studies. So the ratings for before-after and cross-sectional studies considers for factors such as the sample size, the study design, the methodology, and the standard errors of the CMFs to determine significance. Whereas, the ratings for meta-analysis and meta-regression studies considers factors such as data, methodology, the individual CMF quality, the appropriateness of combining CMFs, the CMF significance, and also the appropriateness of the analysis. So there are multiple levels, within these different factors, and points are assigned for each level for a maximum possible score of 150 points. So in the next few slides, we will discuss more in-depth details about the before-after ratings criteria. However, you can also visit, the star quality ratings page at the link displayed on the slide, for more details about the rating criteria for all the study types. So when we talk about, the before-after studies, we should be talking in more detail right now. A total of 55 points of the 150 are allocated to data, where consideration is given to the number of miles or sites and the number of crashes for both the reference and comparison groups and the treatment groups. The study design and statistical methodology, which accounts for the potential biases, trends, and the appropriateness of the statistical procedures, account for a total of 75 points. And the statistical significance of the CMFs, carry a total of 20 points of the 150 points. So this is just, you can say on the top run over, of the different points allocated to the 3 main categories, So this table that you can see on the screen right now, it shows all the different rating inputs that go into rating a CMF from a before-after study. So let's look at this, in a bit more detail. So the 55 points, that we mentioned for the data, they come from these 4 categories, that you can see, highlighted on your screen right now. And so in these ones, 20 points each are assigned to the number of miles or sites and the number of crashes in the reference and comparison and treatment groups. There are 5 points that are assigned to the reference comparison group being appropriate to accounting for spillover or crash migration. And 10 points are assigned for the reporting of before and after traffic volumes. When we talk about the 75 points for the study design and methodology, they come from these 6 categories that you can see on your screen right now. And you can see the major chunk, of 25 points are assigned to addressing the potential biases due to the regression to the mean. Whereas 10 points each are assigned to accounting for changes in traffic volumes, accounting for time trends, ensuring that your reference comparison and treatment groups have similar AADTs and belong to the same roadway or site type. And lastly, estimation and use of appropriate SPFs. And lastly, we have the 20 points assigned for statistical significance of the CMF, with points available, for 95%, 90%, and 85% significance levels. So as you can see, from this table, and from these various rating inputs, the scoring is heavily dependent on you as researchers reporting the data in your studies. So now let us, go a step further and see, what constitutes the 20 points, the first 2 rating inputs, the 20 points for the number of miles and sites and the number of crashes. So the question, what it takes, to get the maximum possible 20 points for the number of miles or sites. So the number of miles or sites, in the reference comparison and treatment groups are scored independently, with each group getting a maximum of 10 points. So as you can see from the tables shown on the screen, using 50 or more miles or sites for your reference comparison or the treatment groups would lead to 10 points, for the category. There are 5 points, which are 5 partial points available if you use 25 to 49 miles or sites, for your reference comparison or treatment group. Now, one thing to note here, using less than 25 miles per sites would lead to 0 points. But the main thing here, is that the number if the number of miles or sites for either or both, reference comparison group or treatment group are not reported in your study, or in other words, they cannot be determined, it would receive 0 points. So, we are relying on you reporting this information in your studies for us to get you those rating points, So moving forward, let's take the next step, and talk about, what it takes to get to the max possible 20 points for the number of crashes, for the reference comparison and the treatment groups. So similar, to the number of miles and sites, the number of crashes in the reference comparison and treatment groups are scored independently, with each group getting a maximum of 10 points each. So for the reference comparison group, 10 points are assigned if there are a total of 500 or more crashes in your reference comparison group, and there are 100 or more crashes per year on average. Then again, there are partial points available, with 7 points given, if your reference comparison group has 500 or more crashes, but less than 100 crashes per year on average. You can get 5 points, if your reference comparison group has between 250 and 499 crashes. And then again, less than 250 crashes or cannot be determined, or unreported would go to 0 points. For the treatment group, we look at the sum of the number of crashes in the before period plus the expected crashes in the after period without the treatment. So in this case, 200 or more crashes would lead to 10 points. Anywhere between 100 to 200 crashes would lead to 5 points, while less than 100 crashes or cannot be determined would lead to 0 points. So if you go to the star quality rating page, guys, on the website, we have these various different thresholds for all the rating inputs for all the study types, that you can review in detail. And that can help you, in deciding, what to report and what not to report in your studies. So now that we have discussed, some details of the new rating system, we have 2 poll questions for you. The first one should be coming up on your screens shortly, and maybe Kelly can pull this up. The question would be: do you prefer us reaching out to you when we are reviewing your studies for further information that can lead to you getting more points, for some of those rating inputs? So you can answer yes, no, or don't care. So go ahead, please, and select your option that you would like to poll. And Kelly, maybe we can stop the poll, and if you can report back the outcomes.
We had 78% say yes, 6% say no, and 16% say don't care.
Well, and I think that's very good. That the 78% yes, it's a very good thing, and that's something that we are trying to build into our systems. With this new rating system, that if we see something is missing, we do plan to reach out to you as authors and ask you for further information that can help your study get higher rating scores. So let's move to the next question. Coming up on your screens right now. Kelly, you can pull this up. So, do you have any of your studies reports that are currently included in the CMF Clearinghouse? So you can select yes, no, or not sure for this one. Maybe give you guys a few more seconds to record your inputs there. And Kelly, if you can close the poll and report back.
We had 19% say yes, 67% say no, and 13% say not sure.
That's something nice. Hopefully, those 67% that say no would be more inclined, to send us their studies, after this presentation. Perfect. So now let's move our discussion, to discussing how the 1772 ratings will be converted to star ratings and what changes can you expect as a result. So the main question, how are the star ratings changing? So the major change, as we mentioned earlier, is going from a 14-point rating scale to a more rigorous 150-point rating scale. So under the legacy system, to get a 5-star rating, a CMF must score the maximum possible 14 points. Under the NCHRP 17-72 rating system, a CMF must score between 135 to 150 points to get to a 5-star rating. Also note, that while star ratings may change in the new system, the CMF themselves won't. The CMF stays the same. So also one thing, that is common under both rating systems is that the CMF must score the 50% of the total possible points. That should be 7 points in the legacy or the old system, and the 75 points in the new one to receive a 3-star rating. So going forward, as we said, earlier, there will be movement between star ratings, with some CMFs being rated differently from their legacy star ratings. So the table that is shown here, on your screens, it provides the information on how the legacy star-rated CMFs will fare under the new rating system. And to provide some context to the numbers you see in this table, roughly 52% of the CMFs, would maintain their legacy star ratings under the new rating system. So with that, we know that close to 50% of CMFs, would see a change in the star ratings. So with this, just to give you some more further context, these 114 CMFs, that you can see on your screen highlighted right now, they were rated 4 stars or higher in the legacy rating system, and they are rated 2 stars or lower under the new rating system. Similarly, there are about 15 CMFs with legacy star ratings of 2 stars or lower that are rated 4 stars or higher under the new rating system. So as you can see, guys, there are some changes, and we have resources, to help you identify what CMFs have undergone a star rating change, which we will discuss, further in this presentation. And before we move into discussing some specific examples, of these changes, we have another poll question that Kelly, you can pull up right now. And the question is, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not important and 5 being very important, can you please rate the relative importance of the CMF star quality ratings to you and your work? Maybe we can give you a few more seconds to record your responses. And Kelly, if you can report back, if you can close and report back.
We had 45% say very important, 48% say somewhat important, 5% say indifferent, 2% say less important, and 0% said unimportant.
And that's wonderful, because this is something that they expected. And with the poll, we can see that for over 90% of you, the star ratings are important. And that's one of the reasons, why we want to be transparent and provide you with all the information, of what's changing and why it is changing. So now, let's discuss, or you can say, let's look at some specific CMF examples to help you better understand, how the NCHRP 17-72 rating system works. So for our first example, let's take a look at the perfect case of CMF ID 8441, which was developed from a before-after study. So this CMF scores perfectly under the legacy rating system, getting a maximum possible 14 points, leading to a 5-star rating. And it also checks all boxes under the NCHRP 17-72 rating scheme, scoring a maximum scoring the maximum possible points for each individual factor, and that leads to an overall rating score of 150 points or 5-star for this CMF. So while the CMF ID 8441 presented an ideal case, where both rating systems lead to the same star rating, as we mentioned earlier, this ideal situation only applies to about 52% of the CMFs. The CMF example you see on your screens right now, the CMF ID 9198, which was developed from a before-after study, presents an example of going from a 3-star rating in the legacy scheme to a 5-star rating in the 1772 rating scheme. So if you look at this thing, under the legacy rating system, this CMF received a 3-star rating due to the use of insufficient sample size, and of course, not using data from multiple states. Now, when the same CMF is reviewed using the NCHRP 17-72 rating system, the CMF still loses points, which you can see highlighted in red, due to insufficient sample size for the treatment group. But it scores perfectly, for the sample size for the reference comparison group and in the various other categories. So this led to the CMF getting an overall rating of 135 points or 5 stars under the new system. So now that we have provided you with these 2 sample examples, we have one more poll question for you. And Kelly, if you can bring the question up on screen. The question is, do you expect the new ratings to impact you or your customers? And of course, you have 5 answers or 5 options. Yes, definitely. Yes, likely, but not in a significant way. Or no, it's unlikely. No, absolutely not. Or I am not sure. Maybe we can give you a few more seconds to record your responses. Perfect. And Kelly, if you can close the poll and report back.
We have 25% said yes, definitely. 35% said yes, likely, but not in a significant way. 8% said no, it's unlikely. 0% said absolutely not, and 31% are not sure.
Yep. So we do see, a trend there, where, in one way or the other, it would impact most of you as per the poll results, So yeah. So let's move forward then. Can you close the poll? I can still not see my slides on the screen.
Yeah, it's closed. It's the same thing as last time where you just need to click out and click back in.
Sure, I'll do that before I continue, that way you don't lose it. Perfect. So you all can see my screen now. Perfect. That's great, So guys, yeah, so now that we have talked about the rating system changes and provided you with some examples, in the next so in the next few slides, we will talk about navigating the star rating system changes on the CMF Clearinghouse website. So, earlier last year, we gave the CMF Clearinghouse website a facelift, and we are sure that many of you have already figured out that it's still the same CMF Clearinghouse that we all know and love, with just a different look and feel. So, we have this updated CMF star ratings page, that lists all the resources and frequently asked questions that are related to the CMF rating criteria changes. And this can be accessed, using the link shown on the slide, or the third box, that you can see on the home page, which says updated ratings. This also takes you to the same page. So we ask you to, go ahead, and review this page to better understand, what's changing, why it's changed, and also, get answers to some of your frequently asked questions that, you can find here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have also worked on a ratings comparison spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet is available on the updated CMF star ratings page. So you can see, in the second paragraph on the star ratings page, it says this spreadsheet. So if you click on the spreadsheet there, it should download for you the spreadsheet, or you can click on, or you can copy the link, and download the spreadsheet using the link shown on your slides. So this spreadsheet provides both the legacy and the new ratings for all the CMFs prior to the rating transition, and is a tool that's made for you to use to identify any star rating changes to your CMFs of interest. Now, we also have a star quality ratings page, which is housed under the About the Clearinghouse drop-down menu, or can be accessed using the link provided on the slide. And it provides details about the new rating system and also the various thresholds a study must meet to get a higher star rating. Going forward, we also have a CMF details page, that you can get to from the CMF search results. So the CMF details page provides the star quality rating and the total rating points a CMF received, along with other relevant information to aid in CMF applicability decisions. There's also a view score details link, and clicking on it opens a new window with details on how a CMF fared under the various different rating categories. So if you click on the view score details page, here's an example of what you will see, and presented here, are the information on all the rating inputs for the various factors and their subsequent rating scores. So we have designed this forum to be as transparent as we can, to give you all the input and outputs, So if your CMF, has been rated and you feel, it did not receive the star rating that you expected, you can always come here and this page and find for yourself, what was missing. And if you figure out that we made an error in reporting something or recording something, please do get back to us, and we can update that in due course. So now that we have talked about navigating the changes on the website, I will turn things over to Dave Petrucci, and he will go over some question and answers. So Dave, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Taha. Hello, everybody, and thanks again for being part of today's webinar. Next slide, please, Taha. So I'd like to tee up a question and answer session here where we'd like to ask you, if you haven't done so already, to please go ahead and take advantage of the question and answer feature here in GoToWebinar and put in your questions. We'll do our best to answer those. And I'd like to start off with maybe what could be a few frequently asked questions that you, your customers, your partners may have, and we can go from there. So here is probably the most challenging of all questions. What should you do next now that this transition has occurred and we have in place a new star quality rating system on the clearinghouse? Well, the answer is going to depend on you. It depends on you, your organization, your projects, and if you are using or developing CMFs, and if their star quality ratings are of interest and are of value to you, then we do encourage you to review the changes that we talked about today, to investigate these changes a little bit more in detail, and feel free to visit the Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse. Go to Star Quality Rating underneath the About the Clearinghouse tab on the site and learn more. And that is definitely an important, I think, step in the journey here, but it's going to depend. If you have a project actively engaged in developing a CMF or more, if you know of a project that depends on a CMF with star quality ratings being important, and you would like to make sure that project experience is aware of this transition to a new star quality rating system, we would encourage you to make sure that you connect the dots. And I think, as Taha mentioned, one of the key ingredients to this new star quality rating system is data, is the information and the availability of that information to our clearinghouse team, so that those CMFs can be scored using the new system. And that's an important consideration for you. Next slide, please, Taha. So Taha also mentioned this in his earlier remarks, and we'd like to just double down on this. Has Federal Highway changed any of the crash modification factors on the clearinghouse through this transition process? And the answer is easy. No, we have not. No, the CMFs themselves have not changed. They remain the same. The only changes are really the updated score and the resultant star quality rating using this new system, as we've discussed. But no, the crash modification factors haven't changed. Those values, those functions remain the same. Taha, next slide, please.
Sure.
So we have access, and I believe we've received a couple questions in the Q&A already on this. Will we still have access to the previous star quality ratings? And the answer is yes. The clearinghouse includes, and in fact, we give you the URL on this slide here. It includes a new addition, a spreadsheet, which is essentially a data download of the clearinghouse at that time, right before the transition occurred, where all of the CMFs, all 7,000 plus posted at that time, were put into a spreadsheet, and you can download that spreadsheet. It contains both the legacy, the previous star quality ratings, and the new, the updated star quality ratings, or the current star quality ratings, I should say. But it's also important to note that all crash modification factors added to the clearinghouse after the transition date, which happened last week, they will be rated using this new system from here on out. So next slide, please, Taha. So we'd also like to take the opportunity to ask this question, or really to pose this question and attempt an answer at it. And the question is, should my projects be selecting and utilizing crash modification factors based solely on the star quality rating, the star rating? And we say the answer is no. Star ratings should not be the sole factor used to select applicable crash modification factors for your projects. Star quality ratings are an important part of the clearinghouse, obviously, hence this webinar that we're attending today. But they should not be the only factor. It is important and incumbent upon the user to select appropriate CMS for your project as you would define it. But please, they should not be the sole factor in determining the appropriate CMFs for use in your projects. Next slide, please, Taha.
Perfect.
And we'd like to wrap up here with this final question, and please, if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and start entering in your questions into the Q&A. But is the new star rating system better? We say yes, the new star rating system is more rigorous. It's an objective than the previous legacy rating system, and users really should continue to ensure that CMFs that are selected for your projects are applicable, that they are applicable to your project based on the road conditions and other conditions that are relevant. So that again is another opportunity for us to double down on the previous question, which was, should the star quality rating itself be the sole basis for selecting a CMF? We encourage you, we encourage your customers, we encourage your projects to not only consider the star quality rating, but to please look deeper, look into the supporting research, please look into the applicability and the context that would ultimately determine how applicable a CMF would be for your situation. So with that, I think, Taha, next slide. We'd like to entertain your questions. I'll do my best to kind of help facilitate this and pick on a few of our presenters here today to help field your questions. So please go ahead. If you're typing something in to the Q&A, go ahead and get that in. That'd be great. I do see we have a couple questions here, and I'd like to kick this question over to our presenters. We have a question from Hugo, who's asking, can we tell the rating based on the CMF ID? A couple parts to this question, but I'll take that first part. The CMF ID is a number assigned to a CMF based on its introduction or inclusion into the clearinghouse. That in of itself isn't going to determine the rating, but like Taha was mentioning, and if you're interested, Hugo, in looking at the ratings, we can go into the details of each score. So to the right of each star rating, you can click on View Details, and we could take a look at more of the details that went into the development of that particular rating. Hugo has another couple parts of this question, and how do the new ratings affect states that have selected CMFs for local use? That's a great question. I'd like to maybe kick that question over to Karen, if you want to kick that off, and maybe others would like to participate. But how will this new rating system affect states who have lists or who have already selected or pre-identified CMFs for use?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the answer is it depends how the state selected the CMFs for inclusion on their list, and so we're encouraging any agency that has a predefined list of CMFs to review the new rating criteria and how it might affect potential inclusion on their list. I don't know, Dave or Jerry or John, if you guys have anything else to add to that.
Karen, thanks. This is Dave. I would like to add briefly, we know that many states have these lists, and typically they are based on the star quality rating. And unless someone's already been quick to it, it's likely based on the previous star quality rating system. We do know that several of those lists exist, and there may be an interest to see those lists updated. But there may be projects that have already pulled CMFs from the clearinghouse and are continuing to use CMFs, perhaps on the basis of or influenced by the previous star quality rating system. So you may need, if you're in a project decision, if you're using CMFs on a project, you may need to go back and look at how potentially that individual CMF has changed in its rating. That might be another consideration too. And I guess last part of this question from Hugo is, are the rating criteria consistent with the CMF development guidelines? So if we follow the guidelines, can we develop high quality CMFs? If I've got your question right there, Hugo, I'm attempting to do it justice, but I'd like to kick that over. Maybe Taha or Srini, if you would like to maybe take an initial stab at that question from Hugo.
Yes, Dave, for sure. So yeah, Hugo, if you use the CMF development guidelines, that are available, especially on the clearinghouse as well, under the development of CMF tab, for sure, you can have a robust study developing robust CMFs. But then again, another important part, of getting a higher star rating is reporting the relevant data in your study report or study document for us to, extract that information from the study and rate it accordingly. So yeah, so maybe I'll say yes, to your question, yes, if you follow the CMF development guidelines, you can develop a robust CMF, but to ensure that the CMF gets a higher star rating, you have to ensure that you do report the relevant data in your study document as well. Maybe
I think,
if you want to add something to it.
If I can add, part of the challenge sometimes is that you will have probably the intent to follow the guidelines, but maybe you don't have the resources to collect sufficient data from sufficient number of sites, a large number of sites. That sometimes has an effect on the rating itself. So part of it may be your intent to follow the guidelines, follow the methodology. There's also a sample size that may affect your rating as well.
Exactly.
Dave, I might just add, I guess, to Hugo's first question. He mentioned about using the CMF ID to look at the star rating. I would suggest that if he has a list that has a number of CMFs on it and he wants to quickly check to see if the star ratings have changed, that I would recommend using that spreadsheet. That the column to the left is the CMF ID. So that would be the easiest way if you wanted to kind of cross-reference your list to the updated changes. It would be to use that spreadsheet that's available on the clearinghouse.
And Jerry, maybe I can add to your thing. I'll just move back to my slides a bit. So if you can see on the slides, guys, now I have this URL at the bottom. So if you know your CMF ID and you want to go to the CMF details page on the clearinghouse website, you just replace those X's at the very end with your CMF ID, and it will get you exactly to your CMF details page instead of searching the CMF anywhere. So yeah, you can always also use this URL and replace those X's in the URL with your CMF ID, and that gets you to the CMF details page, for your CMF ID of interest.
All right, thank you, everyone. I see another question here from Mehdi. Mehdi is asking if the star rating system here is favored to the currently used one. I'm a little not too clear. I see, Mehdi, you've just kind of, maybe you're asking a second question, but a little unclear on your first question, Mehdi.
Yes, it's not clear. The current one developed by NCHRP, I'm not sure what Mehdi is referring to. So that's why I'm not sure what exactly to compare.
Yeah, Mehdi, if you could go ahead and try to rephrase that question so that the rating system that we now have effective February 15 on the clearinghouse is based on the research that Srini and others have been hard at work on in the NCHRP project, and that NCHRP project is it's accurate to say it is ongoing. That is active research.
It's NCHRP 17-72 as it was mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. I don't know whether maybe it's referring to a different NCHRP project. Maybe you can, if you can clarify.
Yeah, and while you do that, Mehdi, we could move on maybe to the second. Oh, I see. You're asking if if the different methods have been compared. Mehdi is asking if we have conducted any kind of comparative analysis between these two methods. So maybe if we could attempt to answer that and describe in a bit more detail how the CMFs were evaluated and looked at and as part of this transition. Taha, would you like to start off with that and then maybe pick on someone else to assist?
Yes, for sure, Dave. I can take a first cut at it. So when we talk about comparative analysis between the two methods, we had this process, where we rated all the CMFs based on the 1772 rating system, of course, and then we had a comparison spreadsheet, where we figured out, how many CMFs would change. But talking about comparison between the two systems, the two systems are the legacy system and the 1772 system. They are two very different systems. One is more objective and more rigorous. Other one looks at only five basic criteria. It's hard to, I would say, compare those two side by side. And maybe Srini or Karen, if you want to join, add to my response, and clarify a bit more maybe.
This legacy CMF Clearinghouse rating system was developed around 2009, 2010, when the clearinghouse was initiated. And so, and then when we had the NCHRP 1772 project started around 2015, so we were asked to look at the time, the different rating systems that are around and see whether we need something more rigorous, something more objective. And that's when this method was developed. And so when we started the NCHRP project, we looked at the CMF Clearinghouse star rating system at the time. We looked at the Highway Safety Manual first edition inclusion criteria. We looked at a method that was used in a previous NCHRP project, 17-25, that HSRC had led a few years ago. And then we also looked at another method developed by Rune Elwick from Europe. So we looked at all of these systems and came up with our own system that we think would provide a more consistent, set of ratings that the users can understand and follow. So that's led to the birth of the rating system.
Great, thank you. We do have a couple more minutes here for your questions and answers. I would like to go back to another question that was put earlier into the Q&A, and it's a question pertaining to star ratings, or I should say scores, using the new system that are right on the threshold of being 1-star rating or another. And if we would consider with CMFs that are right on that border, if we would consider getting more information from the researchers to maybe help clarify the work that was done. And Srini, if you wouldn't mind providing a response to that, and I'd like to ask Karen to add on after you're done responding. Thank you.
Yes, I think this is something that we talked about, because part of the challenge we have sometimes when you're writing a paper, let's say for a TRB, Transporting Research Record, there is a limit on the number of words, and that limits the amount of information that you can provide in a paper, and sometimes that prevents the authors from providing information that we could use in rating the paper. So that's the very reason we were thinking of, okay, if we find that that maybe the case is to maybe contact the authors and find out, do they have maybe another report that has more detailed information that we can use to review that report and then potentially change the ratings based on that. That's kind of what we were thinking, but we haven't really talked more about this once we maybe in the next few weeks to try to figure out what exactly how we would go about doing this. So yeah, that's where we are at the moment. And Karen can follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Srini. I don't have much more to add. I think you covered where we are now. Certainly, if there is more recent information available for us to consider as we're reviewing a study for inclusion in the clearinghouse, we would love to have that. I think it's just the logistics in terms of how we do that, which is one of the reasons that we asked that poll question today. Is would you welcome us contacting you for that additional information? So I think we have some things to figure out on our end, but certainly would welcome any additional information that's available related to that study.
All right, thank you, Karen. And with that, I don't see any other questions in, and I'd like to turn it back over to you.
There is another question from Hugo. He has a suggestion. Maybe we can use the last digit of CMFID for the rating. I think I'm not sure what. I think it's maybe.
I see a question, Srini, and Hugo suggesting, to adding the last digit of the star of the CMFID to being the star rating. Yeah, so that's something we haven't discussed. And
yeah.
One thing we want to keep in mind, this is Jerry, is that keep in mind the star rating is just one of those different criteria that I would use to select the most appropriate CMF for my situation. So.
Mm-hmm.
That's right, and that's the focus of today's webinar, because that's been the big change to the clearinghouse, and so we want to make sure everybody is aware of that change. But certainly there are other factors that go into selecting the most appropriate CMF, the rating criteria being just one of them.
There was one other question that got to be answered, I think, from Reg, about the fact that the clearinghouse only includes studies based on infrastructure. And I think, Karen, you answered. I don't know if you want to provide any further information.
Yeah, so that's so thank you for that question. So Reggie, I think, asked the question, why do we only include infrastructure-based CMFs in the clearinghouse? And we've certainly talked about including behavioral effectiveness of behavioral countermeasures in the clearinghouse, but I think, as you know, that information is much different than what we have available for the effectiveness of infrastructure-related countermeasures. And so we need to coordinate and talk with NHTSA about if and how we might include that information in the clearinghouse in the future. In the meantime, we do capture resources for behavioral countermeasures on the clearinghouse website. And so that information is there. It's just not in the database format that we have for infrastructure-based CMFs.
Back to you, Karen.
So with that, I thank you all for all of those great questions. It sounds like we were able to get to all of the questions today, so that's good. If you have any questions after today, as you begin to explore the clearinghouse and the rating criteria in more detail and how this might impact you in the future, you can always reach out to any one of us. We're happy to answer questions and help you moving forward. I just wanted to spend a few minutes at the end here to highlight a few resources that are available to help you and your stakeholders better understand the transition and the new rating criteria. So Taha, if you can go to the next slide. We have developed 2 flyers that I think Taha mentioned earlier to serve as sort of a quick reference about the new rating criteria. These are on that changes webpage that you can access right from the homepage on the clearinghouse. We're also putting the finishing touches on a 4-minute video that will walk through the new rating criteria and an example. So sort of like a condensed version of what Taha presented today. But that will be available for you to use in outreach to your stakeholders and partners in trainings or those sorts of things. And so we're wrapping up that video, and that should be posted to the Clearinghouse website in the next couple of weeks. You can go to the next one, Taha. So we also talked about this guide today, which I'm glad that Hugo brought that up. We have a guide to developing quality crash modification factors on the CMF Clearinghouse website, as well as recommended protocols for developing CMFs. And while both of these publications were developed prior to this new rating criteria, these are very useful resources as you're developing CMFs. And so I would encourage you to use these resources to develop CMFs. And if you can go to the next slide, Taha, we also have a training course that was developed based on those resources that's offered through our National Highway Institute. It's called Developing Quality CMFs. That's that third training course that you see there. We're currently in the process of updating that course and hope to offer it again later this spring. This is a combination of a web-based and web conference training that's offered over a 4-week period. It has been very popular in the past. We've gotten good feedback on this course, and so if that's something that will be of interest to you, you can let me know, or we usually, or John McFadden, whose contact information is here on the slide. We usually send an announcement out through the CMF Clearinghouse listserv, so if you're interested in that course, stay tuned for more details when we're able to offer that again. And then we have 2 other courses. These are short courses. I think they're about 2 to 3 hours, also combination web-based web conference training on the application of CMFs, and then the science of CMFs, which is really on selecting an appropriate CMF. And so we're updating those courses to based on the new criteria in the clearinghouse and to reflect the current state of practice. And those should be available again in the fall. So keep an eye out for more information about those courses as well. So we have one last poll to see what, if any, additional information you might need to help you adjust to this new rating system. So Kelly, if you can open that poll, and if you guys can just respond quickly about what additional information would be helpful to you related to the new rating system. And I think, Kelly, I'm not sure if you're able to change it quickly, but this should be a select all that apply, and it looks like it's only set up as just one. But we're looking, we're not sure if, if today's webinar was enough for you, or if you need more in-depth training on the new rating system, if perhaps a more informal question and answer session would be helpful. If you need any technical assistance, maybe, reviewing the changes to the ratings for individual CMFs as you update a state or agency-specific CMF list. Maybe you need a presentation like this for your agency. Or maybe you have other ideas on what additional information would be helpful. We welcome your feedback in that question and answer pod, or you can reach out to us directly. So maybe just another second to respond to this poll. And Kelly, if you want to close that and review the responses.
Sure, it looks like 24% had more in-depth training on the systems, and 24% again said question and answer session. 18% said technical assistance, 33% said presentation, and nobody had others.
Okay, that's good. That's very helpful. So I think the CMF Clearinghouse team will consider those responses and opportunities and reach out to all of you with those additional opportunities as they come about. So I have 2 final things before I let you go today, and probably you'll be most interested in, well, I'm most interested in the first one. So when you exit the webinar, a brief survey will load. We would very much appreciate your feedback on our performance today. And then lastly, you will receive a follow-up email after today's webinar. I think we're going to try and get that out tomorrow. That will include a link to download a printable certificate of attendance for 1 hour of professional development instruction. So if there are multiple attendees at your site, you can forward that link to the other participants so that they can download and print the certificate with their name as well. So keep an eye out for that. I think we're going to try and get that out to attendees from both webinars tomorrow. I would like to just conclude with a huge thank you to the CMF Clearinghouse team for all of their help with the transition and the 3 webinars actually, and all of you for taking the time to learn more about the CMF Clearinghouse changes today. If you have any questions moving forward, please feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you. Have a good day and be safe.